I'm pleased that we were able to organize this important event on debanking. Perhaps it's not a term that is commonly used yet in the public sphere in Europe, but I think it deserves much more attention than it's been getting. And I want to first thank my colleague Jorge Geresetti from the Economic Inclusion Group, who sparked this initiative. He's been doing a lot of work on this issue, and I'm pleased to say that we were able to publish this report on debanking that Jorge worked many months on. I would also like to welcome my colleague Elizabeth Dieringer from the Patriots Group, who will also be making remarks later. And thank you for coming, colleagues Branko Grims and Fernand Kartheiser. We have experts, but also individuals who have been affected by debanking. They have been targeted, and they have had their bank accounts closed without any explanation. I think it should not be controversial that every individual who has not broken the law, who has not committed any crimes, should be able to have a bank account. In today's world, it's a necessity. But on debanking, I would just like to read the initial paragraph from this report, which describes what we will be discussing today. So debanking refers to the abrupt termination or denial of essential banking services, especially basic payment accounts to individuals, businesses, or nonprofits without explanation or recourse. Now, in today's world, I think we can agree that everything has become or is becoming politicized, weaponized. We see this in the judiciary, for example, the term lawfare, courts being weaponized for political purposes, but also in the business world. We have marketing campaigns, so-called woke marketing campaigns, which can sometimes also backfire against companies and cause a tremendous loss of value for these companies. And so this is happening more and more in today's world, and the banking sector is not immune to this. The banking sector is also a place where political activists can seize, for example, compliance departments and begin promoting rules that are not fair, frankly. And I think this has happened throughout the West. The most known cases, of course, are with the American president, Donald Trump. His family was debanked during the Biden administration. This was a shock to many people, and I think because his own family was so affected by this, the current administration is moving in a very good direction to address this issue and make it really impossible for banks to continue doing this. In Europe, the best known case is, of course, Nigel Farage in Great Britain. It became so public that in the end he was able to open a bank account, but it is a sensitive issue. And in organizing this event, it was very difficult to find people willing to speak from the business community, especially our targeted defense companies. Now we have in Europe increased defense spending, but many of these companies who are producing the weapons that are needed are facing trouble with basic procedures in their banks. Also, the crypto world. I, as a member of the Econ Committee, I've been cultivating relationships with members of this community. They're innovators. They see Europe as a place with great potential, but they've also been facing discrimination, the majority of them actually. But they have been advised not to speak on this because of the sensitivity. So I want to thank again our guest speakers who are here and will be sharing their stories on how this happened to them. So without further ado, I want to thank again all our partners, the speakers. Nick, Anthony made the trip from Washington, D.C. He's an expert at the Cato Institute. He'll be making remarks later. So I hope we'll have a fruitful dialogue. I think it's essential to open this topic here in the European Parliament. Thanks again for all of you for coming. And Jorge, I'll hand the floor over to you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Elizabeth, for welcoming the doors of the Parliament to us and to be the first ones pushing this issue, which, as you mentioned, is really important, is really unexplored, is cutting edge, and it has ramifications on the rule of law, economic competitiveness, democracy, and even security, as you mentioned, with this aspect of defense companies. What I will do in my remarks today is to explain an overview of this problem of debanking, of financial exclusion. What is debanking? Debanking is a situation in which you, your company, your organization loses your access to financial services abruptly, without explanation, and without the possibility of any solution. These are three key characteristics because they offer no solution at you or no explanation or why you lose your bank account. This is happening to many communities. This is happening to nonprofits, political people. This is happening with former members of parliament, former diplomats. This is happening also to companies, especially in energy, in defense, in cryptocurrency. 86%, in a recent survey, 86% of cryptocurrency companies in Europe, they declare that they have severe banking problems. And a similar situation in less extent is with energy and with defense companies. So this is happening with many kind of communities in the political and in the commercial space. Why we don't hear about it? Because when you are victim of debanking, lawyers tell you to not speak about the situation. So many business people do not speak about this issue because their lawyers tell them to not do so. And the same is with people that are in politics, the same with organizations, etc. But it's a growing problem in the US, in Europe, globally. And why this is a problem? There is two forms of debanking. The first form of debanking is the one that has brought more of the spotlight, especially in the US, which is a direct politicization of compliance departments, of compliance system for political reasons. It's a direct financial exclusion of people just for the way they see the world, just for their belief, or just for representing industries that current governments dislike, such as the Bitcoin sector, crypto assets in general in the US under the previous administration. The second form of debanking is a bit more nuanced, is a bit more complex. It's the form of debanking that is affecting, for example, former diplomats, people that are labeled politically exposed people by financial institutions. This form of debanking is an indirect way. The way anti-money laundering regulations have been growing in Europe, in the US, globally, is making extremely complex financial compliance. In Europe, annually, we spend $100 billion on financial compliance. This is 3 times, or at least 2.5 times more than the US. So because of this situation, there is extensive compliance on different groups that are classified as high risk. People who are involved in politics, people doing trade with, let's say, regions like Latin America or the Middle East or Africa, or people working on new technologies. They are classified as high risk by anti-money laundering regulations, and that pushes banks to not work with them because they become too risky and too expensive from a compliance perspective. Beyond the two debanking problems, there is also severe banking problems in general, We have many people, organizations, company that even if they don't lose their bank account, they need to constantly even switch bank accounts, or they need to constantly provide documentation. Every couple of weeks provide new documentation, new statements. A lot of transactions are being frozen, which results in supply chains disruptions. A lot of money is being frozen. And in general, it's making very difficult life for many companies and many organizations. Because as you know, if you start facing banking problems, your suppliers, your partners, everybody loses trust on you. And especially these days where this debanking problem is still very niche, most people do not understand that if a company is having banking problems, they do not understand why. They think that they're doing something wrong, perhaps. So there is a huge stigma. Why it is so difficult to find victims of financial exclusion to speak out in events like this one is because there is a huge stigma about the situation. Something very important that I want to express is why, for example, the European Union right to payment accounts directive don't work. In Europe, we have directives saying that everybody should have access to payments account, meaning that every citizen should have a bank account. But they don't work because they always have provisions in which they say that if a company or if a person do not meet anti-money laundering criteria, then the bank has a right to deny a person of a bank account. This is something that we have to reform, because what I believe is that if somebody has not committed a crime, everybody deserves the right to a bank account. In today's world, you cannot function without a bank account. You are not part of society. You cannot do everyday life. Your business will be bankrupt in a matter of days. And if you have a nonprofit, nobody will want to donate you if they know you have banking problems. So it's a very efficient way of cutting somebody from society. As I mentioned, there is different implications from this debanking problem. We mentioned the rule of law, democratic perspective, but I believe it is also really important to emphasize that it is also a national security issue, and it is also a financial integrity issue. When it comes to financial integrity, first, if you push people outside the regulated financial system, if you put regular people to transact on black markets, it actually brings more criminality. It actually brings more illicit finance, which is what this anti-money laundering framework is trying actually to prevent. And the second issue is that if anti-money laundering laws continues to be so ambiguous, so complex, so obscure, untransparent, what happens is that you have all these people, all the authorities, all the investigators, all the law enforcement agents not being able to properly assess who is doing money laundering or not, but just trying to check everybody in a big surveillance apparatus. So just to finish, I want to briefly mention that in response to this, what we have seen is that many people are relying on new alternative ways of finance, particularly Bitcoin and stable coins. There has been an increase in the amount of organizations and companies that rely on Bitcoin and stable coins to perform their daily operations. Organizations that send humanitarian aid to Latin America, to countries like mine, Venezuela, to Africa, even to Ukraine. They are using stable coins and Bitcoin. This is a development that we also need to watch because if upcoming regulations in Europe are continuing to be excessively strict to Bitcoin, new forms of payment, new technologies, then we will also kill these new forms of financial inclusion that is helping millions of people, not only in Europe, but around the world. I will finish by saying the three things that I believe we need to reform in Europe to ensure that nobody is debanked. The first one is that all Europe anti-money laundering framework has to really go in the direction of more competitiveness, more simplicity, and more financial inclusion. The way right now these regulations are done is that they're extremely manipulable, politicized, can be weaponized, and are so difficult to implement that if the current trend continues, there will be a point in which having access to financial services will be a privilege. It will be something that only a minority of people, organizations, and companies will be able to have. This is bad for competitiveness. It is anti-European. It goes against everything that we believe. The second one is that there has to be transparency. There has to be real transparency. We don't know how many people have been denied bank accounts. We don't know how many people have been debanked. We don't know in Europe the reasons of why people have been debanked. So the first step that we have to do to solve this issue is that we need to know all this data. We need to have information. We need to have transparent information. Because even though that we are putting this effort to put reports, to put solutions in place, we don't have data. So banks, they need to provide this data. So if somebody loses their bank account, banks must be asked to provide why, and they need to provide also the quantities of how much this is happening. Again, this is key to maintain trust with the people. This is key to maintain transparency so that this situation can be resolved. And at the end, something that I really want to emphasize is that every time that we do financial compliance in Europe, every time that we do these these regulations of anti-money laundering laws, etc., there has to be cost-benefit analysis. Right now, there is none. All these regulations are put in place every year. New regulations to the financial system, new regulations, new compliance procedures that are subjective in nature. And the more that we do this, the more this problem will continue to increase. Because right now, the way this regulation works is that everything is subjective, extremely complex, extremely difficult to implement. So this allows regulators or bad-intentioned compliance officers to debank anybody because they will always find a proper excuse to do so. We need to take away the excuses by ensuring transparency, simplicity, clarity, and there has to be due process. If somebody loses their bank account for no reason, there has to be a process in which they can appeal decisions and that they can have their bank account in Europe. Thank you very much, and I'm open to any questions.
Okay, thank you, Jorge. I think we will continue with the schedule and then have discussion afterwards. So keep your questions in mind. Elizabeth, again, thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
So first of all, thank you very much for having me here today. And as you said before, that we can maybe also start or hopefully start to open the doors and to pay now here more attention to this very, very important issue. So I want to repeat what happens if your bank suddenly closes your account. No salary, no bills, no credit card, no way to receive donations or pay your suppliers. You are excluded from a modern society completely. And this is what they call the debanking, or maybe they also call it de-risking. It's also a very used term. And it happens when banks close accounts or block access to your financial services. Often, as you said, without any transparent explanation. And in many cases, it appears to be politically motivated. The truth is clear. So debanking is more than a technical banking decision. It can become also a weapon, as you said, and especially a political weapon. And it can stop people from speaking, organizing, and also running a business. And I want to start when I first heard about what was happening in Canada in 2022. And in the last month, I met also some of the organizers of the famous and peaceful truckers protest. And what happened? The government froze the bank accounts and also of the organizers, but not only of the organizers, also of the supporters. And even those who gave a little bit of money to go on and to protest. And what happened? The families could not have their own money anymore. And that is what then I was first talking to my colleagues about. We don't have to think only about one person. We always have to think about the whole family and what is happening to them. And Canada, I guess, showed us when governments and banks work together, anyone can be cut off from a financial system. Ask yourself, would this be for you acceptable in a so-called free society? This is not a distant problem. And now I will come to my home country, Austria. And there are also cases like this. And one is also that I know very well the family, the magazine. It is called the Freilich magazine. And it's an independent media. And we always try to work together because they are those who also give us the floor. That we are maybe not those who are always welcome by the other side of the media, but they open for us the place. And not long ago, it was like in December this year, and the Steiermärkische Sparkasse, it's a bank institute in Austria, they closed the magazine's business account, and it was exactly just a week before Christmas. No explanation, no warning, right in the middle of the year end, and when you have to make a lot of payments. The consequences were serious. The team could not pay salaries, bills, or suppliers on time. Editors had to stop working on journalism and focus entirely on the crisis management, handling payments and communication and everything what means to run a business. Weeks of work were lost just because of the sudden account closure. What or why did this happen? Activists openly admitted that the goal was to make Freilich waste time finding new banking and fundraising channels. Time that should have been used for reporting and producing content. This shows clearly how debanking can be used as a tool to silence independent voices and weaken press freedom. But I guess we will hear a lot about this then also from Elsa. And despite the challenges, Freilich survived. But how did they survive? Because of the support of the readers, new subscriptions, and donations. But the cost was high. Precious time, focus, and resources were stolen from the journalistic work. This case is a clear warning. Debanking is not just a financial issue, it's a threat to free speech and independent media. But debanking is not just a problem far away, it happens everywhere. And the other well-known examples, we have just heard about some of them, also in Germany. Also, the newspaper Junge Freiheit had the same problems. Then we have also, as you said, the UK, Nigel Farage, and in the Netherlands, and also in Switzerland. And so all across the European Union, I hear also from many crypto companies that struggling to open bank accounts now at this moment because of strict anti-money laundering rules. And in the USA, yes, everything is well known, and I guess we just heard it. And so these are only just a few examples, not to run out of time, but I could go on and also easily extend this list. But it makes clear to me so that debanking is not only an economic obstacle, it's a form of modern censorship. And it's very subtle, it's extremely effective. And as someone who serves as a member of the European Parliament, I find this is deeply concerning. And we have to talk about it. And we cannot accept it anymore. And we must take action because, as you also said before, everyone should have the right to a basic bank account, regardless, especially of of their political opinion. Banks must be transparent and explain why they close accounts. People and organizations need legal protection, and so that we can also challenge an unfair closure. And political views must never be used as a reason to block access to financial services. And this is a matter of fairness, freedom, and democracy. And because freedom is not only about words, it's about the ability to act, pay, and participate in society. So thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you for that. I agree with everything you said, Elizabeth. We have a few minutes for discussion, so I'll open the floor to any questions you may have. Yes, Fernand, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Stephen, and to all your colleagues for organizing this important event and also for the explanations you give. I have a question. We had a discussion a few years ago in Europe that everybody should have a legal right to have a bank account. I think that extends to refugees, to homeless people, and also in the discussions about the digital euro. Now we are discussing how to make it totally inclusive so that everybody should have a digital wallet. Now, how is this compatible? If everybody should have, even including refugees and homeless people, and access to banking services, and in the digital world the same. So how is this compatible? Is there a legal obstacle or a legal problem with this that we could refer to? Thank you very much.
Yes, there is a clear legal obstacle because exactly in Europe, there is directives that everybody should have a bank account, and there is this effort. But every time when you're reading the document, it says that if there are anti-money laundering concerns with a person, or organization, or a company, this right to banking doesn't apply. So if a person is considered by the bank, for whatever reason, as too risky when it comes to anti-money laundering laws, then these right to banking initiatives are always override. Because the way these regulations work is that you are not innocent until proven guilty. Is the other way around. So what we need to do is to create a framework in which if you are proven by a European court that you did something wrong related to illicit finance, then that's a situation. But for everybody else, you need to be innocent until proven guilty. So that's the specific reform. Until we reform that, the problem will continue happening.
First of all, thank you very much for organizing this conference, and I agree, obviously, with your statements and your observations, but I have a technical question because first you said that the banking system, banking sector is over-regulated, which is, in my opinion, true. But on the other hand, you propose the solution that bank, every time that closes someone's account, should report exact reason, basis, legal basis, and so on, why the bank did it. So isn't it adding another regulations that banks have to comply? How to, let's say, balance over-regulation with this new informing, reporting duties for banks?
Thank you for your question. So right now, the way banking regulation works, and particularly financial compliance work, is that all these regulations are extremely vague, they are subjective, they are complex. So you have a system in which the people who are doing compliance are put into tremendous pressure, also to be not transparent. So right now, the regulation asks banks to not disclose all this information. So from this system of extreme subjectivity, in which if a regulator wants to fine a bank, they can do from subjective reasons, we need to go into a system in which the rules are clear, simple to follow. They are objective. So, for example, if somebody commits a crime in Europe, okay, take away their bank account. But right now, the way it is that the bank compliance officers, they need to navigate in a system of extreme complexity. So yes, it's a new rule, but I believe that we need to take away a lot of bad rules that are really subjective. So it's a matter of having clear rules, clear standards, and due process. So I don't see a contradiction between the two. I actually see it as a simplification of the rule.
If I could just add, so the term that the banks use to justify often what they're doing is reputational risk. Now, the question arises, of course, who defines what is a reputational risk? In the case of Nigel Farage, his party now is leading in the polls. They could take over the British government after the next elections, but several years ago, he was regarded as obviously a reputational risk for all the banks. So it seems that there's too much subjective space in this decision-making by the banks, and that's what needs to be clarified. Good laws, good regulations are clearly defined and do not use terms like reputational risk that can be easily, I would say, manipulated. Okay, so we'll move on to our next session. We have two speakers who have been directly and personally affected by what we're discussing. First, we'll have the Austrian journalist Elsa Mittmansgruber, who kindly made the trip from Austria to share her story, followed by Caroline, I don't want to mispronounce the last name, Fransen, who is here from the Netherlands, who has been a voice for women in the Netherlands for years and was also affected by this procedure. So, Elsa, the floor is yours.
Yeah, first I want to say thank you for inviting me and giving me the opportunity to talk about this urgent issue. I agree with everything you said before, and now I will talk about my personal case and also the case of the online TV channel Auf 1. My personal case. My name is Elsa Mittmansgruber. I'm an Austrian journalist and mother of 3 children. On May the 13th of this year, my private bank account was closed without any reason. It was not a donation account, not a business account, just my private account, which I had opened as a teenager at about 14 years old. For more than 20 years, I stayed with the same bank, always loyal, always without problems. Then, one Friday, I suddenly saw that my account was frozen. I could not send transfers anymore, maybe not even take out cash. I didn't try, but for me it was clear the account is frozen. I was shocked and worried because I could not reach my own money. I called hotlines and even bank staff, but nobody said anything, nobody saw anything wrong. They all thought it was a technical problem, so they told me. But on Tuesday, a letter arrived. My account was terminated without any reason. Only a 2-month notice period and a line about the financial authority. When I asked my bank advisor, she only said, it was an order from above. She could not say any more. For me, the message was clear. It was not about money. It was about my work and my opinions as a journalist. I had spoken against abuse of power, even started a petition for peace, and then suddenly my account was gone. For me, as a mother with 3 children and a job, this was a huge burden. I had to find a new bank, open an account, order cards, change payment details everywhere, school, employer, family office, tax office, and so on. Update online services like PayPal and such things. Learn new PIN codes and processes, to name just a few of the issues. To be short, it took a lot of time and energy. Mistakes happened, payments bounced back, reminders came, standing orders failed, many small problems, but altogether it was very stressful. For me, it was clear, this is the point of such actions. To keep you busy, make you tired, and make you afraid. It's a show of power. We can take your account away anytime. A few days later, the same thing happened to my brother-in-law. His account was also closed. Again, with no reason. Again, only order from above. But he's my family. Maybe that's the reason. He even complained to the official office, but the answer was cold. Banks are allowed to close accounts without reason. No more explanation, no transparency. For me, it was clear complaining was useless, so I decided to go to public. It's the case of Eins. It's even worse. The online channel where I work, Auf Eins. Auf Eins is financed only by donations from viewers, but the donation accounts are also being closed again and again. By the end of August 2025, more than 15 accounts in the EU had been closed. A bank director in Croatia even told us that we are on an international blacklist, said to be pushed by the Austrian government. Sometimes the account is closed only days after it was opened. Once it was closed in just 24 hours. The results are serious. Standing orders must be set up again and again. Many donors stop. Money is sent back. Donors are confused and don't know where to send it anymore. Some try again, others not. Auf Eins loses money. People get the feeling that donation is dangerous. Some fear personal consequences. The constant changes are a big burden. Websites, videos, printed materials all need updates. Sometimes even trips abroad are needed just to open a new account. And sometimes the money is frozen and you must fight to get it back. This makes the work of the channel very hard and it creates fear and confusion for both the team and the supporters. My personal case, the case of my brother-in-law, and the case of Auf Eins all show one thing. Debanking is real. It is used to put pressure on people and groups who do not fit the system. For one person, it means shock, stress, and a huge workload. For Auf Eins, it is even a threat to survival. But still, I found a new bank, my brother-in-law too, and Auf Eins will not stop its work. The message is clear. Fear should silence us, but we continue. This injustice must stop. Our demands to politics are clear. It is the right to a bank account. Every person, every company, every association must have a guarantee right to a bank account. No one should lose it just because of personal or political views. Today, a bank account is necessary for life. Reason for closing. Every account closure must have a clear reason. Only then can people fight in court. Without a reason, you are left helpless. That's all what I have to say, and I thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Elsa, for sharing that with us. We'll move on to Caroline, and then we'll have some time for questions. Caroline, please, the floor is yours.
Is this working? Yes. Dear ladies and gentlemen, dear chair, thank you very much for inviting me here today to make my testimony about my debanking experience. Let me first introduce myself. I'm Caroline Fransen. I'm self-employed since 25 years as a trainer of coaches and therapists, and I'm the founder and initial chair of the Dutch women's organization, voor zij in Dutch. I initiated this foundation to stand up for women's rights to privacy, dignity, safety, and human rights. It was necessary to start a new organization for women because all the other Dutch women's organizations had stopped being women's organizations. They became mixed organizations because of transgender ideology. They all decided to stand up for privileges for trans-identified men. I'm going to use this platform to make some more remarks about the content of why I was debanked and why it's so important. So in my opinion, there are only two sexes, men and women, and men cannot become women, as humans are mammals, and mammals cannot change sex. Every cell in our body is formed by our sex, and so are all our organs. To believe a man can declare himself a woman and therefore become a woman is a dangerous belief pushed on us by a powerful cult. When you add even one man into the category of women, you erase the whole category. you turn the category women into the category human. And that leads to the denial of the specific needs and the position in society of women and girls. Women need provisions where men are not allowed. We need to be able to exclude men from places where we want privacy or where we are vulnerable, for instance, because we get undressed or because we sleep or we are confined, like in prison. We also need fair sports because men are stronger and faster than women, and they will always win in mixed competitions. So men found this loophole to include themselves into the women's category. They call themselves trans women. And by using that word, they think they are adding themselves to the category of women. These men managed to influence society and even women's organizations. So nobody was standing up for women's rights anymore, and that's why we created Voorzij. So Voorzij is the first Dutch organization that doesn't agree with the notion that humans can change sex. Men don't belong in the women's category, no matter how they identify. Men don't belong in women's locker rooms, sports, rape crisis centers, and women's prisons. We state that when you're born a man, you will belong in the male category your whole life. No matter what medication you take, even cosmetic surgery doesn't make you change category. And although this is the biological reality, nowadays this is a very controversial point of view. So our organization and me personally were treated as controversial from the start. They call us transphobes, bigots, Nazis. They say we're not worthy of existing as a person or as an organization. It was a really dystopic. It felt like we were a sort of communist country or in a war on women. We and me personally have experienced threats, doxing, vandalism, defamation, and debanking. I have been in the police station 4 times to report crimes against me. So that's the background. Our foundation had a bank account with Bank. And when we opened the bank account as a foundation, you have to hand over your bylaws. And they were very clear about our intentions to stand up for the rights of women and girls only. But after complaints by trans activists, Bank decided to close our account. They didn't tell it to us by mail or phone us or anything. They just sent some message in the app. So we found out after our holidays that our account was closed already. And we as an organization need a bank account. We need a bank account to collect money, to collect gifts, and we need a bank account to pay for our activities. It was, at the time, it was COVID time, so everything was online, and you need money to buy a Zoom account, you need money to have a website, everything goes, So we tried to fight this decision with a lawyer. I set up a GoFundMe to raise money to pay for this lawyer. So from a lot of countries, women and some men were willing to send us money and to help us. So we raised a few thousand euros, but we never received the money. Because after complaints by trans activists, our GoFundMe was cancelled as well. And all the money was sent back to the generous givers. Then I tried to raise money for this lawyer with PayPal. Well, by now you know the story. Trans activists complained. PayPal cancelled us too. Fortunately, I was prepared, so I withdrew the funds from our account before they actually closed it. So we hired a lawyer, but we didn't manage to persuade Bank to restore our account. And our protest was denied by the banking supervisor in the Netherlands. You have rights as a person, but you don't have the same rights as a foundation or an NGO in the Netherlands. This means Bunk and other banks are allowed to cancel our accounts. They can disrupt our organization, and we could do nothing about it. Of course, we made a fuss about it and we went public. And Ali Niknam, the chair of Bunk, said we were discriminating trans women and we should stand up for their rights as well. So we are in a position now where men can claim to be women, and these men and their rights are more important than the rights of women themselves. Fortunately, I found a new bank for Voorzij, the ING. They accepted us, and we could continue our organization. But we are still cancelled by PayPal. And this had a serious impact on our organization. It has led to a minimization of the activities of our foundation because we couldn't sell tickets to our international events anymore. We used to invite important speakers and activists from all over the world as speakers. They came from the UK, Canada, and America. So that was the way we financed our organization, because we charged the participant for tickets. But we couldn't continue this activity because we couldn't receive money from abroad anymore. So debanking really hurt our organization, our small women's foundation. We were marginalized, and it hurts. Women are still treated as second-hand citizens, also by the banks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline, for sharing that. So we have a few minutes for discussion. After that, we'll continue with the testimony of Nick Anthony, and then we'll have a short break before our final session. So the floor is open for questions. Maybe a question from me for Elsa regarding the media company. Obviously, you have, as alternative media, a growing number of viewers. It's obviously something that the market wants. You've been able to survive despite all these obstacles. And I'm interested in what is the model now as far as financing what you're doing, the content and the server that you mentioned. It's basically online television. Is it... do you think it's sustainable to have the model you have now with basically viewers giving donations so you can continue? Is there perhaps advertising money? Are there any companies that advertise on your media, for example?
That's difficult too. So they have problems too. Only a few dare to do advertising at our channel. So there are not much ways to get money. So the only thing, and I think it's democratic. It's the most democratic thing to get the money from the viewers, and the viewers are the one who wants to send, who wants to do your job. And I think we should find a way that this solution will work. And this is the best. And this is the reason why we are here. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. If there's no other questions from the floor, yes, Fernand, go ahead.
I mean, this is a subject that is relatively new, and I'm very grateful for this discussion. But just maybe, does anybody know whether the European institutions as such have ever taken position on this issue? Since we're here in the EP, I think it would be important to know whether the EP or the Commission or anybody, the Council, has the European Central Bank, I don't know, and enough institutions, whether anybody has ever reacted to that problem.
I had met with, for example, the European Central Bank, some authorities, and they tell me that it's not inside their competence. but at the same time, they produce statements or guidelines that affect financial inclusion. When it comes to the Commission, of course, in FISMA, they have the financial inclusion portfolio. And the European Banking Authority have talked about de-risking financial exclusion. But they always talk about these issues from a lack of financial literacy or lack of banking access. They really don't focus as much on the regulatory issues and definitely don't focus on the political and politicization of financial compliance. So really this conversation is the first conversation in history of the European Parliament on this issue. And I know that, for example, Mr. Bartulica was raising this issue at the beginning, I think, of last year. You were the first one, I believe. So there is really no position, and we are at the forefront of it.
Okay, thank you. We'll move on to our next speaker. Nick Anthony is a policy expert at the Cato Institute, which is a think tank in Washington, D.C., promoting economic freedom, limited government. We want to thank you for making the trip over from the United States. You've been working on these issues for some time now, and I think the view from across the Atlantic is very welcome here. We see much movement now under the second Trump administration. So thank you for coming. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Well, debanking, as you've heard, is a very jarring experience. Your account is suddenly closed and you're left with really no explanation why. You get nothing. You only get told that you have 30 days or maybe 60 to take your money elsewhere. That's it. Yet at the same time, debanking is such a new issue. It's something that US President Donald Trump was made fun of just a year ago on the campaign trail because he mentioned that this was a problem. Now, it's far more recognized today, but it's still a misunderstood phenomenon. Think about how we've heard all of these distinct issues, whether it be account shutdown for protesters in Canada, for the media in Austria, for foundations in the Netherlands. It feels like this constantly moving target to figure out where it's coming from. So I want to share with you a little bit about the American experience and where we've seen a concentrated effort. Now, I won't provide the full history behind this, but Operation Choke Point is something that really captures the issue of the American debanking experience. This was an operation led by the US government through the Department of Justice between 2013 and 2017. And the idea behind the name is that financial services are a choke point for the economy. Rather than have to chase down criminals all across the country, the authorities just had to wait outside of the bank. Just wait for them to bring the money in. We'll get them right there. The problem with this, though, it might sound efficient, it might sound economical, is that the authorities didn't stop at criminals. The authorities recognized that this choke point could also be used for other means. For example, services like payday loans, those short-term loans with high interest rates, they're not illegal, but they're politically controversial. So rather than shut them down legally through the courts, the authorities tried to cut them off from the air they needed to survive, from the financial system. And one of the tools, as mentioned earlier, that was used in this was the regulation of reputational risk. The idea that by shifting the focus away from things like how much capital do you have, how many loans are you giving out, how many clients do you serve, those traditional items on a financial balance sheet, we're looking at reputation. The idea being that if you have people, businesses, activities that are doing business with a bank, and all of a sudden they come out of favor, can that hurt the image of the bank? Can that hurt the reputation? And this was something that regulators increasingly used. And as part of Operation Choke Point, 30 different categories of businesses were named in this. Businesses like payday loans, like gun shops, coin dealers, pawn shops, fireworks shops, the list goes on. To be clear, these are legal businesses, often licensed businesses. It's that the regulators did not like them and wanted to shut them down. And the message was clear. Doing business here meant facing higher scrutiny, higher compliance costs, and a higher chance of enforcement actions. The good news is it wasn't long before controversy erupted during this. Banking associations, think tanks, members of Congress quickly spoke out. William Isaac, the former chair of the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, wrote that Operation Choke Point was touted as a good faith effort to crack down on illegal businesses, weed out fraud, and protect consumers. But none of these claims are true. Ultimately, the operation shut down. After the Obama administration, it was taken off the books. Members of Congress had introduced legislation, but none of that passed. Unfortunately, all that ended this was a promise. The Department of Justice said, this was our fault, we messed up, we're not going to do it again. Now, unfortunately, given that we're here today, we can see that that promise probably wasn't enough. And reflecting at the time on the absence of any type of binding constraint, Dennis Shaw, CEO of the Community Financial Services Association of America, warned that a dangerous precedent had been set here. If government regulators under one administration can target businesses they disfavor, any administration can do the same. And it didn't take long for that prediction to come true. In 2020 and 2021, regulators sent out letters to financial institutions to address the rising interest in cryptocurrency. Concerns spread quickly. Was this another Operation Choke Point? Was this another time that people were getting pressured to shut down business with activities that were disfavored? Concerns spread so much that the regulators issued a clarification. They said, no, it's legal. Working with cryptocurrency is legal. As long as you can demonstrate to our satisfaction that you're doing so safely, soundly, and in a responsible manner. Other regulators echoed similar guidance on this. And here we get to that same problem. The clarification was meant to help, but it was actually a cause for concern in and of itself. Seemingly repeating history, the clarification effectively said that the activity was legal, but serving these activities meant facing higher scrutiny, higher compliance costs, and a higher chance of facing enforcement actions. The issue intensified further in 2022 when the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation began sending private, confidential letters to banks saying that you need to pause all activity, refrain from expanding any involvement with cryptocurrency. With these experiences in mind, Castle Island Ventures founding partner Nick Carter described the experience saying, "What began as a trickle is now a flood. The US government is using the banking sector to organize a sophisticated, widespread crackdown against the crypto industry." And much like how Operation Choke Point began with a single target and then spread, it seems that others have been affected by debanking in America too. The New York Times revealed in 2023 that it discovered 500 people who recently had their bank accounts closed without explanation. One customer learned after his credit card was denied that it was due to, quote, unexpected activity, but that's it. The bank was questioned, and they said nothing in detail, except for the fact that financial institutions have an obligation under the law to know their customers and monitor transactions. In 2024, the Free Press found the issue extended even further. Americans affiliated with religious groups, Middle Eastern countries, African countries, and politics were finding themselves debanked. And the issue really came to a head when Andreessen Horowitz co-founder Mark Andreessen appeared on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast and shared that he had personally seen 30 people debanked in the tech sector. So after years of the issue bubbling back up, debanking had captured people's attention again, and policymakers were looking for solutions. Now, one silver lining to having this long history is that solutions are on the table. People have been looking into this issue. One issue with it has been the reputational risk regulation, and the United States has made progress on this. Congress has introduced legislation to take this off the books. The Federal Reserve and the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency have both taken it out of their examination processes. The Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation has said it would do the same. And President Donald Trump recently issued an executive order that among the items on it was to call for the end of the practice. But it doesn't end there. Another issue, if I'm to name just one, is the issue of transparency. There's a growing need for transparency in this space. You've heard this multiple times already, that people are left without any explanation, any idea of what went wrong. And one of the problems here is required confidentiality. So in one place, the Bank Secrecy Act in the United States, the US responds to anti-money laundering concerns. It requires that banks report people for suspicious activity, but it also requires that the report itself be confidential, and that also that even the existence of the report is confidential. You can't know that one was filed on you, and you can't know why one was filed on you. And yet it is a reason that accounts get shut down. Because if banks keep you on board and they're filing these reports, then they can be held liable, criminally liable, for if you are caught breaking the law. Law enforcement will argue that if you tell somebody that this is the reason that their account was shut down, you tip them off. You then tell this organized crime or this individual criminal that they're on the radar. There's a few problems with this. First, the data suggests otherwise. There's millions of reports filed in the US, yet there's really no one being caught because of these reports. It's probably the least effective way to fight crime. And furthermore, there's really an argument to be made that if an account is shut down of somebody who is truly conducting criminal activity, that's probably a tip in and of itself. It's probably sending them a message already. Yet it's not just law enforcement, it's also regulators who maintain confidentiality. As I mentioned before, when the FDIC, the Federal Deposit Insurance Corporation, was telling institutions to stop working with cryptocurrency companies, they also told them, this is confidential. You can't tell anyone that we're telling you this. This system is completely backwards. It should be regulators bound by confidentiality, and institutions should have the freedom to act as they see fit. And finally, a third layer of this confidentiality is international, with the Financial Action Task Force telling countries around the world that they need to have this exact legislation, that they need to make it illegal for companies to share this information. All too often, this confidentiality is shrouding the issue in secrecy, and it's leaving the public without any information to move forward, without any idea of what they did wrong, leaving them to speculate on really the worst of possibilities, and leaving them to speculate without any idea how to remedy the issue. Some issues can't be fixed. If it's an issue where somebody fundamentally disagrees with me, maybe they just don't like that I wear blue suits. Frankly, it's my favorite color, so it's not going to change very soon. But if it's issues where someone thinks that maybe I did something illegal, maybe they don't understand why I'm depositing $9,000, just under the $10,000 threshold in the United States, I can explain to them, that's just how much money I brought in from my business that week. I have the receipts that back that up. But when we leave this shrouded in secrecy, it really leaves all of us in the dark. And that's something that needs to change sooner rather than later. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you very much, Nick, for that. That was very helpful. We have a few minutes for questions, so I'll open the floor.
You mentioned Sorry, is that working? You've mentioned a few times specifically politically exposed people and ideologically aligned groups. Are there other commonly witnessed examples of victims that occur more frequently than others of this trend?
So an unfortunate example or an illustrative example to that point is people with Middle Eastern last names. In the United States, that's a growing issue. And one problem with this is people with Middle Eastern last names, often because they have Middle Eastern families, are sending money back to the Middle East, sending it to high-risk countries. And so where financial institutions have been deputized in the system to enforce the law and to stay away from these high-risk areas, they end up closing the accounts because they see the customers as being risky for really nothing more than sending money to their friends and family. And it's not unique to the Middle East. It happens with people with African families as well. And so it really comes back to this issue of financial institutions have been put as this unofficial arm of law enforcement. And they become overly sensitive to it, especially when they can end up paying the price for it just as much. There's other groups as well that have slowly emerged over time, but it's hard to get those concrete trends as well. But that's, again, one of the reasons why I really want to see transparency here, so we can start to uncover what are more of those underlying causes that create such a big problem. Thank you.
Yes. Yeah, thank you very much, Stephen. My name is James Holland. I work with Fenomen. Thank you for all the talks today. My question is linked to the court cases that are then fought when this happens to someone. I'm just wondering if you have examples of where lawyers have actually been able to push back against the banks, against national authorities, and make some small victories. Examples where authorities have admitted that they went too far, or where banks have, reversed their previous decisions, paid compensation, things like this.
So one example of this happened with Operation Choke Point. It's one of the rare wins that have happened in the courts, where, if I remember correctly, it was the payday loan industry had sued the government over it. And unfortunately, I'm forgetting the exact developments, but I can follow up with you about them. But that was one of the places where we actually got some of the core understanding of this, was because through the discovery process, they had revealed a great deal of the information behind what was developing. For example, the FDIC had emails, the governing body behind this had emails saying that they hate this industry, that they just want to shut it down, and that they are struggling because there's no legal means to do so, because they're a licensed industry. Another place where we had a little bit of success in the courts was with the cryptocurrency industry more recently, where they asked for information through the Freedom of Information Act process in the United States. And the FDIC, again, shared information, but it redacted most of it. And it used the argument of confidentiality to say, we don't need to share this. It's too much. And so what we effectively got back was a piece of paper covered in black lines. Luckily, that was taken to court, and the judge said plainly, this is absurd. This is ridiculous. You cannot offer this up and say that you're doing this in good faith. So there were 2 rounds of removing those redactions. And that's when we got to see that the FDIC, again, was instructing institutions explicitly to pause all activity and to refrain from expanding any activity. And we also got to see the information that was redacted, aside from that, was absolutely mundane. Nothing was revealing personal information. It wasn't revealing the institutions, their holdings, or anything like that. It was clearly that the FDIC was trying to cover up this issue.
Just as a follow-up, then there's a case there for compensation, no? for an institution going beyond its powers.
There is, but there's so much regulatory cover now. There's so many, for example, safe harbor exemptions, that it's very hard to establish standing in that degree. So in one of the safe harbor exemptions, all you have to do is demonstrate that you were targeting criminals, that you were targeting bad actors, and they kind of get to wash their hands from it. That's a related but slightly distinct issue that I do work on as well, though, where I'm trying to get that reformed, because it's created a incentive to kind of overshoot. And that's where we get some of these huge reports as well, and requirements for large-scale sweeping reports, because they don't have any accountability behind it.
Yes, Nick, I have two questions for you, or maybe I think important clarifications. You mentioned about when right now banks are delegated these police functions. I think this is something that none of us here have gone into detail. I think it would be really nice if you explain that. And the second question that I have for you is, what are your overall thoughts? And if you also can explain the Financial Action Task Force system, whether it have been positive or actually negative on all these conversations.
Thank you. Two very fun questions. So on deputizing banks as law enforcement, very briefly, this is a system that the United States created in the 1970s called the Bank Secrecy Act, and they exported it around the world. So it's everywhere in some form or another, in some name or another. And the short version is that banks are responsible now for reporting suspicious transactions or transactions that trip some monetary threshold. So in the United States, that's $10,000, everything is reported, and anything suspicious below that. Now, about 20 million reports were filed last year just for using $10,000, and about 7 million or so were filed for other reports such as the suspicious transactions. Now, on suspicious transactions, it'd be one thing if this was, they suspect me of terrorism. They suspect me of human trafficking. They suspect me of something truly vile. Yet the majority of these reports are not for that. The majority of the suspicious transactions are really because you got close to $10,000 but didn't cross that level. They think you're avoiding the threshold. Yet it can be cases, like I mentioned before, where maybe I just made $9,000 that week. Maybe I work at a farmer's market, and that's what I'm taking home. And so we have this system where they are this unofficial arm of the government, and they need to act in this way. And the Financial Action Task Force is kind of the international parallel to this. And they create rules that they try to push on to countries around the world. One of them I mentioned being that this process should be confidential and it should be hidden from the public. And yet it's just assumed that this process works. There isn't a real cost-benefit analysis at the domestic level or at the international level. In fact, all signs to what we can see with what limited data is available is that it's all costs and no benefit. And so, as if that wasn't enough, it's also causing countries to become in really dire straits because the Financial Action Task Force and also by extension, the International Monetary Fund, the IMF, can put countries on gray lists or high risk lists. So I mentioned before, sending money to a high risk country, a gray list country, can get you debanked. It can have your account shut down because you have the unfortunate curse of being born with family living in another country. And you're just trying to help them. You're just trying to do the right thing. You're trying to benefit from the opportunities we have here and share it with them there. And so the Financial Action Task Force, through just this one lens, has hurt so many people. And unfortunately, it's using this list often to impose its recommendations because it says that if you don't do X, Y, and Z, make this confidential, collect this information, take these people off your client list, make it illegal to do this and make it illegal to work with them, we're not going to take you off the gray list. We're not going to take you off the high risk list. And that's a lot of power for an organization to have. That's a lot of power for one group to impose on everyone else. And that's a lot of power for any group to be so removed from the country that it's controlling. So it's a major problem in this, and it's how this issue has extended well beyond our own borders.
So perhaps we should have our concluding session and then have time for coffee instead of breaking. I would like Jorge just to elaborate in our discussions leading up to this event. You shared to me the experience of many dissidents who leave countries that are under authoritarian rule like Venezuela, and then when they're abroad continue to get harassed by these governments who are trying to shut them down, to silence them, and so on. Could you elaborate on how this is possible if someone, for example, flees Cuba or Venezuela or another country? These governments can continue to harass them, track them, and even get their bank accounts closed.
This is really a problematic situation because the way I began working on this issue a couple of years ago is that I was among activists from many places, including Venezuela. And we were having a private dinner, a conversation. And they told me that they didn't have bank accounts, even when they moved to Washington or when they moved to Brussels. And I was asking them why. They didn't know exactly, but they told me that they were under intense pressure from regimes. If you're an activist of a country like Venezuela, and you probably have a lot of misinformation against you. You probably have media articles calling you a terrorist, a criminal, CIA agent, all these kind of allegations. And of course, more, even worse allegations about tax evasion, these kind of issues. When you have these kind of allegations against you, and then you try to open an account in, let's say, here in Belgium, then when the banks does the KYC, they know your customer on you, they will see that you have all these allegations and they will just rather not give you a bank account because the cost is too high and the reward for having the bank account of an activist is too low. They often, there's not, hundreds of millions of dollars on those accounts. This is why the term in banking is de-risking, which you mentioned, is because they are not taking the risk of having this kind of clients. But this is highly problematic. The second issue that we need to also reform is that because the way Nick mentioned, because banks have the duty of collect your data, it means that your data is not owned by a government institution or by the due process of a formal institution. Is held by banks and it can be transmitted by banks. So all your private information, your private banking data, but in today's world is also your travel information, is pretty much everything, can be shared by banks in many jurisdictions. So it can be shared by a bank in Belgium to a bank in Latin America. If the bank in Latin America asks the Belgian bank that they have some suspicions about a specific person. What is the problem of this? Is that means that everybody in this room, we are at the risk of our banking data to be shared to somebody who doesn't like us, to a political enemy, in the case of people who are human rights activists, freedom activists, but in the case of business people, to business enemies, which again is also really interesting in the context that we are living. We are living in a period of fragmentation, of globalization, in which you have China being a direct competitor towards many European businesses. As you may imagine, if the banking information of a person or a business is transmitted without them even knowing, it means that the competitive advantage that they will totally lose. And at the same time, if the European authorities would like to have the same information and level of transparency with Chinese businesses or with Chinese banks, good luck getting that information. So it's really asymmetric. So what is the problem? The problem is that you're a human rights activist, you probably will not have a bank account in Belgium, or you probably will have issues all the time, and that your banking information can be shared without you even knowing.
Yeah, it's very interesting. So, final opportunity for questions before we close our event. Okay, Elizabeth, would you like to say something in closing before we finish? Please, you have the floor.
No, thank you very much. But it was very interesting in a kind of way. But it also was, for me, the information that we are all over the world, missing maybe some states, but that we have now a new situation that we are facing. And one of the most important thing is not only to think about it, to stay at home and criticize or something like this, but to act. Yes. And that it's now in our hands, and that it's always in the hand of the politics. And that's why I am in politics, and that's what we have to do. And if we have all the different examples, the different ways of acting that we collect, because why not? Learning from the best. So it's always a good system that we stay in contact, that we share, that we have to do something. So that's for me the most important way to do now and to go on. And as you said, we have opened the door and we won't close it. And I guess a lot of other colleagues maybe now join us, and so that we can go on like this, and that we should not be afraid, and that we have good examples here. They are not afraid. They acted, they reacted, and they did something, and they found also a kind of solution. It's not easy to find it, I know it, and the rest that we can do is to support people who have done their way, that they reacted, and that we should work together. That's the most important thing.
Thank you. Jorge, maybe some concluding remarks?
Yes, thank you. I want to, just for conclusion, thank you again for helping us organize this. And thank you very much. I appreciate it. It's a new issue. It's an issue that is difficult to even imagine that banks can be politicized in this way. So I just want to thank you for opening the doors of the Parliament for us, and thank you for everybody who joined the session. We are happy to answer any questions at any hour, because we really believe that we need to reform this. If we don't reform this, imagine the way the situation is going to be in 5 or in 10 years. Banks have a specific function in society. They should be intermediators between savings, between investors, and they should do only financial things, not political. So thank you very much.
Yes, thank you for all the work you do, Jorge. This was, I think, very useful. Clearly, debanking is just another dimension of cancel culture. You know, it's a way of canceling people in a way, silencing them. As a conservative, I'm always trying to limit the possibility of abuse by people holding power, whether that's politicians or people in the finance industry. Abuse of power leads to suffering and great injustice. And so that's why we've organized this event. Hopefully people will read this report and we can start a serious discussion here in the Parliament about solutions that we've suggested. But I think it's necessary to really highlight this issue, not remain silent. And so this is perhaps the beginning of this process. Someone mentioned